Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheels Boy Chat, the show where we sit down to have long-form discussions about topics related to the Chinese car industry. I am joined once again by Mr. Mark Andrews.
It's getting like deja vu, isn't it?
It's getting incredibly like deja vu. In fact, it is literally deja vu. But the topic of today's video is one that I think you guys are going to be very interested in, and one that I couldn't possibly have imagined discussing even in the last few years. And we are going to talk a bit about the rumors that have been swirling around that two very famous Chinese automotive companies may be for sale. We're going to talk about who they are, who should buy them, and why it is a really big deal that this is even something we could be discussing. So the companies in question are NIO, known for making the high-end luxury EVs, and then XPeng, known for making more affordable and then attempting to make high-end luxury EVs with the G9 vehicles, again EVs. And we've just been hearing rumors that these two companies have reached a point maybe where they're open to being bought up by another automaker, whether it's a foreign automaker or a local automaker, another Chinese automaker, maybe merging with them. First of all, Mark, let's take them one at a time. Do you think it's a legitimate, it's a legit rumor, or that it's even possible that XPeng could be for sale?
Well, the financials of both are not particularly great.
So yes, let's maybe take a second to why is it that we think that both of them, why is it, I think they both could be for sale, for the record. And the reason, as you just hinted at, is that the financials for both of them are not looking that great. Yeah. It's looking like they're going to have some tough road ahead of them this year.
Having said that, it would seem that XPeng is probably in the worse situation than NIO.
Yes.
NIO claims it has enough money to keep going for 2 years, I think I've heard.
With their R&D budget? Ooh.
Yeah. Well, the biggest problem, I would say, with both these companies is that their sales just aren't ramping up as much as we expected.
They've been very, so with NIO, sales have been flat pretty much for 18 months. They just launched the ES6. They had flat sales last month. We're recording this in around the middle of the beginning of June, but in sales in May were they didn't see a spike that they would have hoped for.
Yeah, so they were basically flat from April, yet they actually started deliveries of the ES6. Now the ES6 should be one of their best-selling cars.
And it's been their highest-selling model since the beginning.
And I'm not sure how many ES6s they actually delivered, but that must mean the other models did pretty badly. Even worse than the month before,
you could make an assumption based on those numbers that that's the case.
Yeah.
And then you have XPeng, who basically they're
all over the place.
Yeah, their previous two model launches. Now the G6 has just come out and we've reviewed that, but the model launches before that were the G9 and the P5. So two very different vehicles, which show, I think, where XPeng wasn't really sure what they were doing. The P5 was a affordable sedan under $30,000 electric. They're all electric, all the XPengs, that had some interesting choices on it. For example, it was the first XPeng to have their LiDAR system.
Well, it's the first mass-produced car anywhere to have a LiDAR system, in fact.
In fact, you're right.
But it took ages for them to actually do anything with that.
Right. It's like, we've got the hardware. You'll be able to use it to do something at some point in the future. And eventually, they did come out with a limited release of their City NGP, their City Navigation Guided Pilot. But it really wasn't until their next generation vehicles, the P7i, which was the mid-cycle refresh of the P7 sedan that is out now, that has the latest XNGP driver assistance system for city and highway, and the G9 and then the G6 now.
Yeah.
The P5, I don't even know if it has it, but
P5 has what?
The P5 has the latest XNGP.
No, it's not capable of it. So P5 is trapped in the old system, whereas the P7i and the G9 are in the new XNGP system.
There you go. And so that was just a weird decision on their part, I think, to launch their flagship LiDAR system in a affordable sedan segment that doesn't care about that. Then there was the G9, which was frankly just too expensive. And then
too expensive, I would say, for an XPeng. Perhaps.
For an XPeng.
For people's expectations on what an XPeng is.
Because apart from some limited edition versions of the P7 sedan with like Lamborghini with scissor doors, you know, most XPengs, a vast, wild majority of XPeng P7s were the ones that were sold for less than 300,000 RMB, or about 45,000 US dollars. The G9 started there at around 300,000 RMB, and then went all the way up to 460,000 RMB at launch, which is anywhere $70,000+, around 70,000 USD, and people just weren't prepared to pay that for an XPeng. And then the problem with the base G9 was that felt like a stripper model. It's a company that prides itself on having LiDAR systems with a base model that has only standard cruise control, not even ACC, not even adaptive cruise control. Now that car launched, and then they immediately dropped the price because they got really bad feedback.
And
then
they
also
had problems with actually the naming of the models, and the model range was just too complicated for people to understand.
Just gonna say,
it was a real mess.
Holy moly! If you have an Excel spreadsheet of XPeng models and the trim levels, you can scroll from one side like this way. This is all the model. You can scroll across them for half an hour before you get to the end of it. It's so overcomplicated, all the different versions that they had. And so it was very confusing for buyers, and they had a ton of canceled orders. Doesn't help that...
Yeah, I think within 24 or 48 hours, they redid it all.
Yes.
Something like crazy
It doesn't help that around the exact same time, the Li Auto L8, which is a direct competitor, even though it's an extended range EV with an engine that powers the battery and charges the battery and charges the motor, or powers the motor, I'm sorry. But a direct competitor in terms of size, price, and all that came out almost immediately. Like, they came out the day before, I think, or something. Is really, really close. It seemed very deliberate that they came out before G9's launch, undercut the G9. It was
one thing with the Li, how they actually sell things, is it's basically you pay a fixed price and you get everything.
Super simple.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 different trim levels, very few options.
There's no really even trim levels. I think there's just like a few different paint colors and things like that.
So on the L9, that's true. On the L7, L8, there is the Max and the Air.
Oh, right, okay.
And point is, much simpler. It appealed to customers more, and the sales reflected that. So this video is not supposed to be us dumping on XPeng, because we like a lot of their cars, but these are just the realities of what's happened. So that's why these two companies may be in a position to be up for sale, so to speak, because they are, neither of them, in a strong place to face what is going to be a difficult and very competitive next couple of years against companies like BYD, against Li Auto, and against...
Or even up-and-coming companies like Neta or Leap.
Neta or Leap, who are
actually have better sales nowadays sometimes than they do.
They do. So that's why they could be in a position. Now, again, I find it legitimate that they could be for sale. But let's take a second to think about who would buy them.
Good question.
So who would be in a position to buy them in the first place, do you think? Like who would maybe benefit the most from, let's say, picking up an XPeng?
First of all, somebody has to have fairly deep pockets, I think, to buy either of these two companies. But obviously with XPeng, what XPeng does have is its ADAS capabilities.
Right.
And so that is obviously attractive to a lot of companies. And I think generally...
It has 800-volt architecture as
well.
well.
800-volt architecture as well,
and supercharging and stuff.
Yes.
So
the
point is there's assets.
Basically, there are definite technological assets that it has. So I think these are things that a lot of companies will find attractive.
But I think the companies that will find them attractive aren't other Chinese companies.
No.
It's legacy car makers.
Yes.
And this is why this is such an interesting conversation to have, is not many people are talking about GAC, Chinese automaker GAC, buying up.
Well, I think GAC doesn't need to, because quite honestly, GAC's in a relatively strong position when it comes to EVs.
With Ion,
Yeah, they're doing quite well with the Ion brand. Yeah, they don't need to.
No. And so we're talking about companies ranging from Volkswagen to...
I think the German companies...
The Germans. I was going to say...
The Germans are prime candidates.
Volkswagen, BMW, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, I agree, are prime candidates for somebody that could snatch up a company like XPeng, or I think more likely NIO, and benefit from the technology that they have, whether it's the charging tech. In the case of NIO, it's the battery swapping technology, which That's a whole other video we could do about whether or not that is a serious long-term solution to to the issue of electric infrastructure or lack of EV infrastructure as charging gets quicker and quicker. But there's some value there, certainly.
Definitely.
So I think a legacy automaker like a Mercedes-Benz, and we do know there is a famous photo that leaked of William Li, founder and CEO of, I believe still CEO, founder of NIO, meeting with the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. And so they're at a conference room above, I think maybe above the NIO stand at the Shanghai Auto Show. What does that mean? Nothing, really.
Yeah, nothing. It's pretty common for them to get together.
There's exchanges of there's exchanges and stuff.
Particularly the auto shows.
Particularly, that's where they happen. It's like neutral ground that they can meet on. I think that it's probably it's going to come out as, if anything, it's probably going to be some announcement that like we're cooperating on creating a new generation of more stable Bluetooth connections in our cars or something. It's not like we're buying NIO, but it did, like, there's one of the things that sparked this conversation. So. And then when it comes to, so with NIO, we see the assets they could sell. With XPeng, we see the assets that they have that could appeal to a company. I would put forth another company.
There was also some German executive who said something on these lines to me as
there
well.
Was.
But
there
I'm not going
was.
to name the company.
We
or
will,
whatever.
for purposes, we will say that we will not name the specific company, but there was a German executive with which Mark happened to be riding on a subway following the auto show, who mentioned to him that he personally certainly thought that
XPeng was for sale.
That thought XPeng was for sale, and that the company he represented, should buy it.
Yeah.
And so the other one I would throw in quickly would be somebody like JLR. Jaguar Land Rover.
Yeah, well, Tata, yeah.
And Tata. Tata,
Yeah.
the group that owns JLR, who has the money.
Yeah.
Would maybe has the purse strings. Would they have deep enough pockets to buy?
That's questionable.
That is, yes.
Yeah,
without like leveraging
questionable.
themselves.
I mean, obviously, also one of the American companies could go. I mean, they probably have the money.
Oh, sorry, like the
GM
big
or
three.
Ford.
GM or,
Well, is there a big three now? Isn't there only a big two?
Not really, because Chrysler.
Yeah.
It's just Jeep and Ram. So I find that less likely only because I feel like, well, maybe for the purposes of the Chinese market, and they have the pockets that are deep enough. Both of them are in relatively healthy positions that they could do it. It's not off the table. It's not off the table. But I think the thing that is so surreal about the conversation that we're having is that for over a decade now, for multiple decades, we've been seeing the complete opposite of this, which is Chinese companies buying the assets of foreign brands.
Yeah.
Oftentimes those in dire straits.
Yeah, usually.
Talk
Started
about
basically with MG Rover.
Started with MG Rover, which was purchased, well, part of it was purchased by one company,
yeah.
another part of it was purchased by SAIC, Shanghai Automotive Industry Corporation, or Industrial Corporation, either way. And so you had the remains of Saab and those assets being picked up by Hongshi, technically by NEVs.
Well, partly also by Bike as well.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize that.
You had basically the Sonova brand that was based on the IP of the Saab 9.5 and the Saab 9.3. So
it's always
I even drove one as well. It was, and you actually had bits of Saab in it.
Did it have the key here?
Yeah, I think it did.
Oh, then it had to have been a Saab.
There was like quite a lot of Saab elements in it. Although with the Rowe 750, for example, it was very obviously based on a Rover 75. Whereas with the Sonovas, it wasn't so obviously based on the Saab on the outside, but when you were on the inside and various elements, yeah, you could see the Saab in it.
So Evergrande Group, which Evergrande Auto purchased, had NEVs, National Electric Vehicle Sweden,
which they never did anything with.
Which they purchased the Saab assets. So they said they were going to make electric Saabs. That never happened.
Yeah.
And then
Sounds
you
a familiar story with Evergrande, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And so they also own, for the record, NEVs, a 20% stake in Koenigsegg.
Oh yeah, okay.
Most people don't know that. So you also, and then that was maybe the first generation there, and the second generation was Geely buying up Volvo, Lotus,
Geely was actually,
Proton.
I think Geely was earlier. Geely was really quite early with Volvo.
They purchased Volvo in, I think,
2010, around 2010.
I thought it was 11 or 12, but
No,
either way, it was early.
It was 2010.
That was a
Or
huge
even
deal.
2009, but I think it's 2010.
So either way, it was Chinese companies purchasing foreign brands, and now we're in a world where these Chinese companies have enough value, enough assets that foreign companies are thinking of buying them. So it's just completely flipped around.
Whether it's actually even legally possible, I'm not sure.
Right, there are a lot of barriers to that because I don't necessarily know that the Chinese are going to want all those assets that they have to be given to foreign companies used within the Chinese market to then compete with Chinese brands.
Yeah, one friend of mine, actually, Chinese person who's in the automotive industry, a consultant, made a very interesting point about NIO one time, when NIO was actually having quite a lot of financial problems in the past. And he said that NIO was too well known for it to be allowed to fail.
Fair.
And so it had quite a lot of support, government support.
Sure.
And that's basically why you had that huge injection of money from the Hefei provincial government, etc., to shore up its finances previously. And so, yeah, that may again happen. And also, will it be allowed to be sold as a result?
That's true. I think, here's what I would throw out. I think a more likely scenario in the event of a full-on collapse of either XPeng or NIO is that it would be a case where a Chinese automaker would absorb them, because the Chinese would want to keep it. Yes, would be told you're going to absorb them because they wouldn't want those assets to be going into the hands of foreign automakers. I think that's probably that seems possible, but. Either way, I think it's going to be a tough row to hoe in the next year or two for both NIO and XPeng for the reasons we outlined before.
They've got to really increase their sales.
They do. There's
no other. For some strange reason, we've driven, I think, both of us, most of NIO's second generation cars.
All of them. I've driven the ET5, the ET7, the ES7, the ES6, all the ET 2.0 cars.
They're good.
Yes.
They're good.
And they're good.
But for some strange reason, they're not selling as well as the first generation cars, or don't seem to have as much traction. And I don't really understand why.
Because everybody in Shanghai already has one. We're based in Shanghai, and I will tell you, the numbers we've heard is that like a third of all NIOs are sold here in Shanghai. And you can tell. Oh my God. They're thick on the ground. They're the Camry of Shanghai, as we say. Everybody and their mother has a NIO. But yeah, I mean, it's like pinch me, am I dreaming surreal that we're talking about these foreign companies wanting to purchase these Chinese companies when it's been the complete opposite for
I think
so long.
that there's also a personality element in this equation as well. And that you have both companies dominated by people. Particularly, well, actually no, in both of the companies, they call a lot of the shots. And that is not necessarily a good thing.
So the anecdote that you were telling me recently was that you asked somebody from XPeng, why don't you guys have heads-up displays? Everyone has heads-up displays. They're great. They're helpful. And they said, well, He Xiaopeng said we didn't need it because our technology was so good, right?
It's going to be off the record.
Oh, is that off the record? Allegedly.
Oh, yeah.
Allegedly.
Somebody might have said something.
We might have heard something from a person.
Yeah.
But that's not surprising, really, with these companies. I mean, it's. Let's just take that as an example. I don't think it's surprising. These guys are very they're very involved in the process.
Yeah.
And so I guess if it was to be sold, then would they no longer be involved? Maybe would that undermine the brand?
That could possibly. Well, it could actually save the brand as well. Because in fact, XPeng has now brought in a CEO, who I think acts as a vice. I'm not even sure how it kind of works because He Xiaopeng is still involved, but I think it's been a little bit sidelined from what I can work out. So they've got a new CEO who used to be with Great Wall. It's the lady. I don't know what her name is. I can't remember.
Our apologies to you, man.
Yeah.
We should know your name.
Sorry, madam.
Oh,
God. I'm getting too excited.
Mark is so upset that he forgot your name that he almost fell out of his chair.
Yeah.
And so maybe he's taking it. That might be ultimately helpful in the long run.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
So I think if there is too much of a personality in these companies, and that they're not necessarily listening to what people are saying and calling the shots out of gut or whatever, it could be causing a problem which may then be impacting on the sales.
Yes.
Because, I mean, one of the things that obviously XPeng needs a car now to sell well.
Yes.
The P7 did for a long time. The
Right.
P7i, the refresh, is actually making the car competitive again.
Yes.
But they're too dependent on the P7. The G6 that we've just driven seems like it could be a winner so long as they get the price right. But it looks as if the next car is going to be an MPV.
Which won't be cheap. I bet it'll be
won't
over.
be cheap,
it'll be
but
G9
also
price at least.
it's not exactly going to be a huge seller.
No.
And what they need is volume.
Right, right. And the P5 was too damn boring. If I just
Well,
could put the needle on, I don't know. It's just not a compelling
The
vehicle.
P5 is a deceptive car. It's unphotogenic.
True.
In every photograph or video, it just looks, for want of a better word, ugly.
But in person,
But
it's not that
it actually
bad.
doesn't look that bad in reality. I don't know why in any picture it just doesn't look good.
True.
But in reality, it's not such a bad-looking car.
It's just the proportions aren't
yeah,
particularly
the proportions
photogenic.
aren't favorable. Yeah.
Well, these are all the reasons that, I mean, I think that it makes sense that these guys could be for sale. As we discussed, I think that more than likely it would stay within China if that were to happen. I find it unlikely that they would be
Yeah.
allowed to be purchased by a foreign automaker.
Yeah.
But, you know,
is a possibility.
it's incredible that we're even having this conversation. And it shows how far the Chinese electric car industry,
Particularly electric,
yes, has come, and how competitive they are, and frankly, how terrified a lot of these legacy automakers are, especially the Germans, because they have a huge market share here in China.
Well, they
Volkswagen,
did.
They
did, we should
They
say.
had a dominating market share, especially Volkswagen Group, and Mercedes and BMW and Audi were doing very, very well. And then all of a sudden, not so well. BYD is already outselling the Volkswagen brand specifically, not the group, outselling the Volkswagen brand here in China, and that is a huge deal. That is a huge deal for a Chinese automaker to do that. So there we are. I mean, the times, they are changing.
Oh, very much so.
Absolutely. You guys let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think these companies are legit for sale? Is this some unfounded rumor? Do you think that they should be purchased by a company? Who should they be purchased by? And then, you know, what is their value, you know, if they were to be purchased? We do want to hear from you. Please let us know in the comments below. But for now, that's going to do it for today's video. We will see you in the next one.